an Italianoff right here, right now.
Yeah, prove it. Read some Dante to me. In this episode, we're watching Season 11, Episode 6, Starcrash. But first, some follow-up. Adam, do you have any follow-up for us?
Yes. I have just recently recorded an episode of Fiasco Brothers Watch a Movie, which is a podcast done by friends of the show, Tim and Sean. It is a cult movies podcast that is hosted by essentially, imagine the two coolest film/media/English teachers that you had, and you have an idea of the tone and style of it. It's super fun. I recorded an episode on the perennial fascist comedy Death Wish 3, which came out roughly around the time of our episode on Warrior of the Lost World. And since that was out to celebrate Donald Pleasence Day, I celebrated Donald Pleasence Day myself by recording yet another episode of the Fiasco Brothers Watch a Movie, in which I guested to watch Donald Pleasence's vehicle Raw Meat, which will be coming out, I think, a week or so after this one. There'll be links in the show notes. It's a really fun podcast.
Excellent. What did I do on Donald Pleasence Day?
Yes, Beth, what did you do on Donald Pleasence Day? I meant to throw to you, but I had a mouthful of coffee.
I had a job interview.
Please tell me that it was to dryly narrate something with menace.
It wasn't a job I was really shooting for, but I'm trying to get back into the interview game. And it was good that I had this dry run because I remembered two things that I had kind of forgotten. First of all, go way ahead of time because these places are hard to find and they give very obscure directions.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, if you're a lady, bring your high heels with you and don't wear them because you're going to be spending a lot of time wandering around trying to find this place.
I can only imagine that you had to prepare yourself for the inevitable question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Ooh, that is an exciting question to answer.
Yeah, and I still don't have a good answer for that.
Oh, my default is I just tell them, owning a suit.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I once had somebody follow up on that, and I panicked. I said, I just want to have something I can be buried in.
And then you had to be, a suit, not a person.
Yes, please, I'd like to be buried in the surviving cast of High School Musical, please.
Well, beyond that, I don't think we have too much follow-up. Should we go straight to the movie?
Yeah, let's jump in. Some time ago, in living rooms far, far away, we watched MST3K, episode 1106, Starcrash. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships, completely visible in the Christmas tree lighting scheme of outer space, have been attacked by a secret weapon of red monsters. Another victory for Zarth Arnold's evil galactic empire and his space fortress that looks like a fist. Surely the Empire's saving up to extend the space fist with a space forearm, just so Zarth Arn can live in a Zarth arm with his Zarth army. Space pirate Stella Star and her magical sidekick Acton stumble upon the rebel fleet's sole survivor and are tasked with warning the Emperor of the First Circle of the Universe about Zartholomew Argy's red monster weapon, but are unable to evade the dreaded Texan police bot L. Stella and Acton are sentenced to a life of space mining by a space judge who looks like Krang. Stella breaks free but is pursued by space cops with Rich Evans nowhere in sight. Stella and Acton are reunited and are joined by L, the police bot, and Space Police Chief Thor. Since Thor's a shifty-looking lizard man who looks like a green Telly Savalas, he betrays them to the space despot with a John Lovitz-like undercarriage. Zarth Brooks is... Chris Space Gaines... Zarth Algar. Thor's taken out by Acton, allowing the space pirates and their new police bot buddy to go on a shaggy dog adventure where they get into a fight with Amazons on horseback, outrun a giant robot with a cup size of C-38 to the power of 20, keel over an army of Egas, fight twin robot ninjas, and contribute nothing to the plan that ultimately does save the universe from evil leather daddy Zarth Simpson. Who the hell are you? Acton dies while Stella falls for a guy in a bronze Sumerian mask. Lucky for Stella, the masked man's not one of those alt-right YouTubers who disguises their unimpressive features with an avatar of a Sumerian figure. No, it's Prince Simon, son of the first circle of the Emperor of the Universe, whatever it was. Stella joins Simon and Son. Elle is torn apart, but he's put back together real fast, so don't bother crying over him. He's back to life faster than Spock. And the day is saved when Simon's merry men crash into Zarth Marenghi's dark place in empty photon torpedo tubes. The real story here isn't the characters, world building, or special effects. No. Starcrash is all about Stella Star's many fabulous outfits. They are, in order of appearance, glittery turquoise number with black boots, clunky silver spacesuit, space bikini with collar, space bikini sans collar, armored silver figure skating outfit with black pants and sleeves, saran wrap with space bikini and red Velcro chastity belt, and an armored silver figure skating number with red pants and sleeves.
Meanwhile, in the opening, Jonah and the bots are playing Spin the Bottle. Crow and Gypsy refuse to kiss Tom, but Jonah's pretty game about it. For the invention exchange, the Mads introduce another food-themed creation, this time the Bandito, with Max sporting bandoliers equipped with all the fixins and a sombrero filled with salsa. Where the actual food is, I don't know. Meanwhile, Jonah has replaced Tom's body with a globe reminiscent of the cute sidekick drone BB-8 from Star Wars The Force Awakens, and Tom is still looking for that kiss. In segment 2, Crow has returned to his script-writing roots, attempting to put together the ultimate sci-fi melodrama, World War Space. Jonah plays the naive magical hick, the Duke of Swirl, while Tom voices Princess Lolly with a heavy Cockney accent. It turns out Crow cribbed most of the script from the Candyland board game. Jonah plays the movie's curly-haired sidekick, Acton, in segment 3. He initially impresses the bots, but then is forced to admit he doesn't know how his powers work, then breaks into tears. And then there's legendary segment 4, in which Kinga and Max attempt to secure the funding of venture capitalist Freak Masterstroke, played by Jerry Seinfeld. He suggests that Kinga turn Jonah and the bots into apps to increase the audience's second screen experience. Meanwhile, Jonah affixes some googly eyes on Tom. And in the final segment, Jonah plays the Manos-like villain Count Zartharn, while Tom and Crow keep popping in on torpedoes, recreating the movie's confusing final action scene. Max wonders aloud,
Does that count as driving them insane?
Beth, what did you think of the third episode we covered for the new series? Do you think this is also a good way to get into the new series?
Absolutely. So I should say I hadn't seen this one before. I've been kind of saving most of the series just to explore it as we come to it in this podcast. And the riffing is very good, but more importantly, this is a really fun movie. It is beautiful and just the best kind of bad movie you could expect, where it is entertaining and fun, but still amusing in that it was really poorly made nonetheless.
Yeah, I had revealed last episode that I had seen Starcrash unmisted many years ago. It is a hoot and a half. This is a fun movie to watch. It is silly. It is bonkers. The plot changes every 5 minutes. And there are certain films that are not good, but are very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that. I have a real soft spot for it. Like, I can't deny that I was entertained by Starcrash, and has a lot of things that I genuinely like and a lot of things that are just silly and bad. The script is terrible, but I kind of love the character of Stella Star. I think I genuinely love the idea of Caroline Munro as a space pirate who travels with this TARDIS-like wardrobe that's full of her many, many costume changes.
Mm-hmm.
Because she has not one but two different beekeeper-looking spacesuits.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a set buff. I really like just looking at how a film has been put together, and
Mm-hmm.
I really have a soft spot for late 70s, early 80s special effects, and just the kind of set design they did back then, especially for sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of beautiful. I mean, it's kooky. The stars are made out of Christmas lights. It's pretty obvious, but it's kind of fun to see a version of outer space where it's not quite so bleak and empty. It looks very inviting and flashy.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved about this movie. I love the set designs because all of the spaceships look vaguely like a futuristic living room.
Mm-hmm.
all the miniatures are really nice. The animation effects are lousy, but like the miniatures are great, and the stop motion animation is really good. I loved the twin robot ninjas and the giant Amazon bot.
I was trying to think, what does this most look like? And if you've ever seen the exterior of the Pompidou Center, which is a museum in Paris, the Pompidou Center has been designed so you can see all of the guts of the building, but they've all been given like really fun colors. So the air ducts are like teal and the pipes are fuchsia, and it just has that kind of inside out quality to it. And this movie is a lot like that. There's a lot of glass. There's a lot of really fun colors throughout.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is like looking at one of Basil Wolverton's Space Hawk comic strips. Like, this is colorful and strange and goofy, and all the creatures kind of reflect that. Like, there's some incredible miniature work here, and there's some great stop motion effects, like the twin robot ninjas, the Amazon bot, and the space squid who is basically Krang.
Yes, the space squid was really fun. What else did I like? I liked the Amazon horses. That I don't know how they did it, but the horses looked like they were painted fuchsia. And Tom Servo makes this comment: it looks like they put Crocs on their faces.
Movie magic.
Yeah. And also just like the film quality. I was trying to figure out how this movie could possibly look so good, if they must have remastered it or something, but the film stock's in really good shape.
Yeah, well, this is we'll get a bit into this in the Shadow 13, but this was not a really cheap Star Wars knockoff. There, like, some money was put into this, and this is why of all the Star Wars knockoffs, it's actually one of the better looking ones if you compare it to, say, Roger Corman's Battle Beyond the Stars or the infamous Turkish Star Wars.
So we both like the movie. I mean, we should say, like, this movie is still, like, bad in terms of it makes no goddamn sense, and it's really hard to follow what's going on, and the characters are laughably unbelievable, and their motives make no sense. But everybody's having fun. It's clear that everyone's having fun.
Not to mention, the fabulous, dramatic, but really bright and poppy lighting for the movie. Like, everything is blue and orange and just bright single colors for every scene. It looks so great. And the characters are fun, and the world is super silly.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about it, and I think movies like this make for the best MST3K experience. The best ones either are bad but really fun movies that are fun to watch for everybody, or they're so bad that it challenges the crew to come up with something really interesting to keep everyone going. I find the toughest movies are the ones that are just kind of dull. And so they're not interesting to watch as a fiasco, but there's not enough there to really keep the audience engaged either. I think that's a really hard balance for MST3K to do anything with. So this is when they're at their element, where it's just a genuinely fun movie. And you can see most of the time they're just like, what is going on? This is so goofy. And like, they don't resent the movie, you know? So we both like the movie. What did you think of the riffing around it?
I think this is a good episode. This is one of a handful. I'd say there's about like 4 episodes that I think are like up there with some of the best MST3Ks of the past. This is one of the gems of the new season. And one of the things I found super interesting is they did an entire musical number. They muted the movie, and ordinarily they don't really mess around with the film, but they mute the soundtrack and they do an entire Beach Boys inspired number.
Gallifrey cruisers and the dudes of Iraqis, they all leave us alone cause they know what the facts is. Got 4 fusion chambers and a tachyon bolt.
And ordinarily they would reserve these kinds of moments for a sketch in the host segments. And I think in this case, by stopping things to just do an all-out musical number is a really clever idea.
But something else we see kind of a return to is character continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were complaining in the last episode that the sci-fi era seemed to kind of forget who the characters were individually. And now we're getting a sort of return to what had been developed during the Comedy Central era. Tom had a quiet character thread where he's fascinated with kissing. Do you remember that one sketch where he's just like, what is it to kiss? And then Joel ends up getting a big smack on the front after his soliloquy. And so we get a bit of a return to that. And then Crow is writing scripts again. He had Earth versus Soup for a while. He wrote the Patrick Swayze Christmas song, and here he's writing a sci-fi melodrama, World War Space.
Yeah, not only the kissing sketch at the beginning of this episode, but also him unveiling himself as a BB-8 inspired redesign, where he is now running around on that little soccer ball. And I think he announces himself. It's like, I'm a highly marketable new character. Like, it's perfect. It's like their voices are back.
But you did mention that this isn't like other cheap Star Wars ripoffs. But let's be honest, it's still a Star Wars ripoff, right?
Yeah, I mean that goes without saying. This would not have gotten made had Star Wars fever not struck. This is one of the more blatant movies to come out following the rise of Star Wars. But yeah, it's funny how this movie does and does not feel like Star Wars, though. Don't you think?
Well, we should mention, the director Luigi Cozzi, now, he's made several claims about how much he cribbed off Star Wars. So Star Wars, The New Hope came out in 1977, and Starcrash came out in 1978. So he claims that his script and the filming had been well underway before Star Wars hit and changed the world. And then there was just some last-minute tinkering to kind of bring it in line with this new world of sci-fi being respectable and fun. Another line that he has given is that Star Wars had hit the world, and it was, in everyone's interest to rip it off as quickly as they could. And his producers had been pushing that, but the Star Wars movie was not available in Italy at the time. So he had to work the script off of an airport novelization of the first episode of Star Wars. Do you believe that?
No, not at all. Like, I don't think that they would have spent as much money on this film, because when you hear the phrase Italian knockoff, which is almost a subgenre of its own, you kind of picture movies like Warrior of the Lost World, which look cheap even when they're ripping off cheap things. Mm-hmm. Whereas like Starcrash looks like a decently budgeted movie and has some impressive visuals to go along with it. Mm-hmm. And you get the sense that the only reason so many resources were put into the movie was, holy crap, Star Wars is it, and we're all aware of it, and we know how to rip it off because we're familiar with it. Like the shots for the special effects, that's all pretty blatant. Like there's no way it's like, oh, we were shooting this in advance. Like, and you know what? Ripping off Star Wars is not the end of the world, because Star Wars ripped off a million things too. It has to be said. It was neat that someone a little fella with a Kermit voice of his own, George Lucas, decided to mix Kurosawa and Flash Gordon. That was a cool idea. No one had ever done that before. And Starcrash goes one further of, what if it was that, but like really garish? I much prefer that. I'd rather watch Starcrash than Star Wars, to be honest.
A lot of people have said that. I was looking up a lot on the internet, and there's not an insignificant number of people who think that Starcrash is more fun than Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, things that it has going for it is that it has a great soundtrack by John Barry. As we said, it looks good. And to go back to our discussion about clean versus dirty sci-fi, unlike Star Wars, this is a very clean universe. It's run by a benevolent emperor. The Empire looks very much, actually, like the interiors look a lot like the Death Star interiors, with the black floors and everybody running around in matching uniforms. But it seems to be coming from a slightly different place, where everything in the future is ultra modern. There's nothing broken down in this future world.
And that's actually something that I think highlights the difference in attitude of how these films got made, and also I think further underlines that despite what Cozzi says, this was an explicit ripoff of Star Wars, and that's fine. It's fine that happens. It's okay, Mr. Cozzi. Star Wars is things are a little dirtier because of the resources that they had, but also it makes sense from like a narrative perspective, even if it is intentional or not, that things are a little broken down and things are a little bit dirty because, you know, it is about these characters who are being pursued across the galaxy by an evil empire. So, you know, you have the pristine look of the Death Star and the Empire and what their interiors look like versus the scuzzier backgrounds that we find like Luke and Han in like the first movie.
The cantina and all of that
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
And with Starcrash, even the space pirate ship from a couple of lowly space pirates, we never get the sense that they are dangerous or in danger because everything is pristine and nice. And I think the reason for that is that so much money got put in trying to outdo Star Wars that no one in their right mind would think, oh, this should look dirty and beat up. It's like, no, we spent a lot of money on this. We want everything to look nice.
Yeah, that's a good point. It also could just be like European glam, you know, that sense that everything has to be chic. Even the underground marble factory, you know, looks really cool. Looks really nice and clean.
Like, there is nothing lived in about this universe, but I am totally fine with that. It's like being in a music video. And again, I really like that. This is a fun, silly movie, but you know, that also comes with taste. You know, one of the reasons why I found, say, Rogue One to be such a boring experience is that I know what I like in Star Wars. Beth, do you know what the best part of Star Wars is?
Oh.
It's Return of the Jedi, and it's where there's that extended scene in Jabba's palace where Jabba, the space slug, eats rat monsters for dinner. And there's a little bat creature named Salacious Crumb, who is his toady, who laughs at everything that Jabba says because he's a little toady. There's a gross-looking testicle vampire guy who goes up to C-3PO and goes, "Hey, Wanawanga?" Which just sounds like the filthiest suggestion. And R2-D2 is used as a little robot butler who has to carry everybody's drinks around. And there is, if you watch the original version, there is a puppet band with a little blue elephant named Max Rebo, and they perform a disco tech glam song that totally rules. It is the best musical expression from the entire Star Wars canon. It is the only part of the Star Wars scores that I like. I'm not crazy about the music of John Williams, but that song is awesome.
So it sounds like you like it when they go full Jim Henson.
Yeah, I go to Star Wars for silliness. I don't really get much depth out of the story. I don't find the characters that interesting or moving. When the films are being silly, they're great. Mm-hmm. when the films are embracing the silliness and the inventiveness of the crew, of the special effects people, then they're at their best. And that's kind of like George Lucas's main talent, was not that he was this great storyteller, but that he brought along people, not unlike Roger Corman, come to think of it. He brought along the right people to help him tell that story, at least initially.
Mm-hmm. It rips off another well-known sci-fi movie, a little number called Barbarella. Have you seen it?
Yes. Of course I did. Yeah. If anyone's seen the poster for Barbarella, you're immediately seeing Barbarella afterwards.
Yeah, Barbarella was made in 1968 by Roger Vadim. It stars Jane Fonda. It's basically, how would I describe it? An aristocratic European's wet dream in the 60s. So Jane Fonda, much like Stella in this movie, is some kind of freedom fighter military force, but doesn't actually do anything. Just goes around to different locations in an episodic way, wearing different outfits. And the outfits are the reason to watch that movie, in my opinion. They are so much fun. My favorite is the skunk number that she wears.
And the film itself is very weird and silly. Like Starcrash, I think, touches on that. But I would also say that the 1980s Flash Gordon is way more of a Barbarella ripoff than it is a Star Wars ripoff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And it's also fun to see, because if memory serves, Barbarella is often assisted by a winged angel character who if memory serves, is played by MST3K alum John Philip Law, who is the bad guy in Space Mutiny and the anti-hero of the original series finale, Danger Diabolic.
Really? That's the same guy?
Yeah, John Philip Law. And John Philip Law also played Sinbad in the one Sinbad movie with Caroline Munro. And I bring that up just because when I was watching the movie freshly for this second viewing of this episode, and I guess my fourth or fifth viewing of Starcrash as a whole, it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, what this movie reminds me of is the old Sinbad movies. And I guess I maybe I'd made that connection earlier with, Caroline Munro being in it. But I had looked the film up on IMDb, and what was listed there as trivia was that Luigi Cozzi was trying to make essentially a space Sinbad, and that's exactly what this feels like. And apparently, trying to secure Caroline Munro for the film was a big deal for him. But that might explain why things are the way they are, and it might also explain why, rather than going in the direction of imitating John Williams, John Barry, for his score, kind of takes the opposite route and does something closer to what Jerry Goldsmith did for his amazing, and again, way better than the Star Wars score, a soundtrack for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Like, this is way more about like kind of the gentle sailing sounds of space. Like, even when the action is ramping up in the movie, the film score is about keeping things in kind of like a slower, calmer build, because it's like no, they're treating this like these are sailing ships rather than spaceships. And I think that's a really neat way to go about it. And I have to say, even though they kind of comment on the supposed similarities of the scores, I don't think John Barry's I was about to say Moonraker, which he did score, as he is indeed the guy who created the James Bond sound. But John Barry's score doesn't sound anything like Star Wars to me. I mean, other than the sense that they're both big orchestral scores.
Right. Yeah, it definitely, now that you mentioned Sinbad too, because the main issue, the main structuring point of this movie is that it is a series of very loosely connected vignettes. And they weren't able to find a way to tie it together coherently.
The more I think about it, the more this reminds me of Hercules Against the Moon Men in terms of how it is structured, and all of the Italian Hercules movies. I feel like the tone of this movie it's interesting because this is something that I love John Barry's scores. Like, John Barry is one of a handful of composers who I will always stop and make time for. And Barry had this interesting thing. The sillier the movie is, the more he plays down his fairly big sound. Like, he came out of essentially like jazz and like popular beat orchestra. Like, he had a big hit with a track called Beat Girl in the 1950s. And of course, his original band, they were John Barry and the John Barry 7, to the point where I don't think it's Dr. No, but I think it's From Russia with Love, that when Barry is credited, it's even credited to John Barry and his John Barry 7. And I find it interesting that the more over the top things got with James Bond and other kind of genre pictures that he would score, he would play it down. His King Kong score is the same way. He did the 1976 remake. And that is silly and over the top. And, it was written by one of the three main writers of the Adam West Batman, so that gives you a sense of the tone that they were trying to go for and do not pull off at all in that film. And Barry resists it. Barry goes for something somber. And I like that he did the same thing here. Like, the music that plays when the very silly photon torpedo attack is happening and they deliver the death blow to Zaratharn's Seven Nation army. The music that plays there is, like, again, it sounds like something that would be not out of place in a Sinbad or sailing picture. And maybe that's the way to go. Like, Moonraker infamously has a character whose name is Dr. Goodhead having sex with James Bond in Zero G at the end of the movie, while James Bond's superiors look on from NASA and go, I believe he's attempting re-entry, and then do all in their power to not stare directly into the camera. And rather than surrender to those instincts and go with the tone that the movie is putting off, Barry rises above and creates something like placid and interesting and kind of serene instead of surrendering to the action. So there's something equally fabulous and striking about Starcrash that has nothing to do with special effects or set design, and that is the walking human special effects that is Marjoe Gortner and his super fabulous hair.
Yes. Now, do you know anything about Mr. Gortner?
No, the only thing I really know about Marjoe Gortner is that he had some experience as a preacher prior to becoming an actor.
So Marjoe is a portmanteau that his parents came up with. It's a portmanteau of Mary and Joseph. So that gives you an indication of what kind of religious upbringing he was born into.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's amazing. Now I really wish my grandfather's go-to swear was Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And now I really wish he just said Jesus, Marjoe.
He was born in an evangelical household, and according to them, he heard the word of God at an early age and became a child preacher and went around the country for various revivalist sessions. I don't even know what you call that. Basically, a bunch of revivals which were really big in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. And I actually watched the Oscar-winning documentary called Marjoe, which takes a slice of life where it follows him around in various revivals as an adult. But it starts with kind of a background of what it was like when he was a young boy, and they have some clips, and it's just so sad because this kid is just so dead-eyed and is obviously hating every minute of it. So, like, his parents were, although they made it sound like he had been blessed by God, they were just, like, the worst kind of, like, child actor parents, you know? Like, he had no childhood. He was basically, all they did was just force him to memorize, you know, his sermons and practice his big sermon voice and his preacher voice.
I say, hell is a place of extreme bodily suffering. Down on this earth, we do everything we can to escape suffering.
And they did beat him, but in ways that wouldn't show bruises on for the revivals.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he had a really rough childhood. And then when he hit his teens, his father, they had made a lot of money with this child preacher shtick. His dad ran off with like $3 million, and Marjoe left his mom and did the hippie thing for a while. And then as this documentary picks up, he's doing it again basically for the money. He doesn't really believe in what he's doing, and he's about to leave it, and he's had a change of heart, and he's invited the documentary crew to follow him around to kind of show how this whole shtick goes down. And he makes no bones about it. He's like, you know, this is all horse shit. But wow. He's also strangely, he's very conflicted about it, but what he's doing is just like, you know, this is what I've been raised to do. If I've been brought up in a secular household, I would have been an actor or you know, a movie star, because he really does. He likes being in front of a group. He's got a really charismatic presence. This is the skill set he has. So he's trying to figure out what to do with it.
Is he charismatic in his preachings from what you saw in the documentary? Because I did not find him so in Starcrash.
I mean, from what I can see from the rest of the evangelicals that went around, like he was more youthful. He had more energy. He was he said that he cribbed a lot of like Mick Jagger moves to just give it a little bit more of a strut. So there's maybe a little bit more of a sexual version about the way he presents himself than other preachers at the time. But it's sad to watch, and he points this out too, because his crew is mostly made up of like white hippies from the coast. So they're just like, why do these people believe this? And he goes, you know, they don't have, these are really, really poor, depressed communities. And this is their way to kind of get out their emotions and express it in an acceptable way, because you have people fainting and screaming and speaking in tongues. And there's really nowhere else in their life where that was acceptable.
Huh.
Yeah, so he's very conflicted about it, and it's hard to say whether he's a good or bad guy coming out of this, but you can certainly, he says at the end he wants to go into acting, and then he ends up doing that afterwards. Spoiler alert. Mm-hmm. None of the movies he did in the 70s or 80s are very of note. He was on Kojak for a while, apparently.
Okay.
And he always had the curly hair. That was basically his crowning glory, even as a kid. And it goes full 70s perm for Starcrash. And then he seemed to move away from public life in the 90s. He stopped acting and he went into charity work. But I found a picture of him as an older man. He still has that fabulous head of hair.
That in the end is his greatest achievement.
If you want to see him in anything else, his last role was Wild Bill, the movie Wild Bill, where he plays a questionable preacher, actually, interestingly enough.
Well, that actually may be worth seeing.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
Let's do Shallow 13. 13 quick and interesting facts about the episode we just watched. Go, Adam, go.
At the relatively high budget of 6 million lire, this Starcrash was filmed in Italy as Scontri Stellari Oltre la Terza Dimensione, or roughly translated, Space Skirmishes Beyond the Third Dimension.
This Italian Star Wars knockoff inspired its own Italian knockoff, Giochi Erotici nella Terza Galassia, or Erotic Games in the Third Galaxy. It concerns space princess Bella Starr, who learns about sex after crash landing on a paradise planet when her spaceship is shot down by stock footage from Starcrash.
Though basically softcore porn, these erotic games were released in many areas as Starcrash 2, and the film was included as an extra on Starcrash's French DVD release.
The kinetic American trailer for Starcrash was the last trailer director and noted MST3K detractor Joe Dante would edit for New World Pictures, the studio owned by MST3K arch-nemesis Roger Corman.
Director Louis Coates, aka Luigi Cozzi, expanded on Starcrash's motifs of outer space with Christmas tree lighting and stop-motion robots with Hercules and the Adventures of Hercules, starring Lou Ferrigno.
Coetzee is also known for the infamous Coatzilla, a sepia-tone re-edit of Godzilla that mixed scenes from the 1954 Godzilla and its 1956 American dub with Raymond Burr, alongside real footage of corpses from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oof. For more works of Louis Coates, consider Coatseeing up to the films like Contamination, a mix of Ridley Scott's Alien and James Bond, Sinbad and the Seven Seas, where Lou Ferrigno's Sinbad is trapped in a Princess Bride framing device, and Paganini Horror featuring, you guessed it, Donald Pleasence.
Starcrash is the first in a holy trilogy of films where Joe Spinell terrorizes Caroline Munro. William Lustig's Maniac is the darkest and most cerebral of all the three, while 1982's The Last Horror Film is often derided by fans for its subplot about a planet of space bears.
The forename of Caroline Munro's Stella Star, Stella, is the Italian word for star. So her name is Star Star, like Mario, Sirhan, or Hands of Fate.
If you were confused by Acton's strange powers, it's because Acton was supposed to play a non-human alien, but Gortner refused to wear prosthetics. So instead, you just get a human with glow stick augmentation, I guess.
Name-checked in Jonah's UFO song, Doctor Who and Dune planets Gallifrey and Arrakis, Star Wars' Kessel Run and Slave One ship, Star Trek TNG's Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher, Serenity, Close Encounters' Roy Neary, Forbidden Planets Altair 4, Communion author Whitley Strieber, Gort's Safe Words Klaatu Barata Nikto, and Mork and Mindy's Nanu Nanu.
Dana Gould is credited with co-writing this episode. The stand-up comic prominently employed the phrase, "Go to bed, old man," in his early act, which Joel referenced numerous times during his tenure as host of MST3K.
This episode references the concept most feared by pickup artists and other candidates for worst living humans, friend zoning. That's when the object of your sexual desire is only platonically interested in you. The term originates from The One with the Blackout, a 1994 episode of What Else? Friends!
And that's time. I just watched that one.
What, for funsies or research?
I was going through it. I was just like, what does it feel like to watch Friends all over again? I would still wear a lot of those styles.
We were talking about Marjoe Gortner just before the Shadow 13, and he is one of many, many interesting faces. That's one of the things I love about Starcrash. One of the many things is that, like, the cast is super interesting.
Yeah, what the hell is Christopher Plummer doing in this?
Well, he loves Rome, so any excuse to be there. Although he did give a nice little nod to that in a recent interview. When he was asked about being the Emperor of the Universe, he seemed pretty tickled by it. He said, "How can you play the Emperor of the Universe? What a wonderful part to play. It puts God in a very dicey moment, doesn't it? He's a very insecure god when the Emperor's around.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite moments in the movie, too, is when they have him on a hologram. He turns around in his big golden cape, and they're like, oh, he's peeing in the corner. Because it was exactly what that looked like.
Yeah, I'm surprised that, there has not been a compilation of just junk movies that Christopher Plummer has done over the years just so he could visit, like, nice locale. They could call it Plumbing the Depths.
Yeah. How do you explain Rockadoodle?
I don't think anyone can. There's a chicken who's like Elvis. It's like, that is the worst idea for an animated motion picture. And I have seen Rover Dangerfield, which dared to ask the question, what if Rodney Dangerfield was a dog?
We also have David Hasselhoff's very first appearance on film. And what did you think of Hasselhoff's first acting role?
Well, you know what? This might sound a bit weird. I actually thought he was more comfortable on camera than Marjoe Gortner. Like, he was slightly better than the guy who made no impression on me. But again, he's David Hasselhoff. He does what little he always does, even now.
If you know Hasselhoff from maybe his most famous role when he was on Baywatch, he's a very lantern-jawed, bulky fellow. He's a very manly man. So I was surprised to see Hasselhoff here because he's a lot younger, obviously, and that perhaps is why he looks a lot more androgynous. Like, he's got eyes like a Cupid doll. He's very, like, long lashed and kind of girly looking. It was interesting to see.
And his hair is, like, significantly more 70s out too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he got jealous of Gortner. They're territorial with their respective dues. Did you ever, like, follow him in anything? Did you watch Baywatch or anything like that when you were a kid?
No, I never did, but I really loved his take on Hooked on a Feeling. That music video. First of all, he's got a good set of pipes, so it's worth checking out for that. And it is one of the goofiest green screen videos where he just happily flies through a whole bunch of happy people doing happy things. Oh, and he does take full advantage of the Ooga Chugga beginning.
That's true. And of course, some research from a mid-90s comedy news segment suggests that Germans love David Hasselhoff. But I saw this great one-man show while I was in Edinburgh called The Lion, Bitch, and the Wardrobe. And, comedians just talking about, his very many weird gigs. But one of the weirdest gigs he had was, I believe he was doing a set at this kind of like Grand Prix racing event with David Hasselhoff. And like, it makes sense that David Hasselhoff is there. He's associated with Knight Riders. People think cars. They think David Hasselhoff if they're of a certain age. Why a comedian would be there, nobody knows. But he described, David was perfectly nice, but would often be hitting the sauce pretty heavily for events like this. And after the show, the comedian was at a urinal, and Hasselhoff got up right next to him, and a song played. And as soon as the song was playing, Hasselhoff was just like rocking out whilst literally holding himself. However, the musical number was so swaying that he kind of forgot to finish unzipping. So he just held his own penis while pissing himself, dancing to the song with his eyes closed. That is an image that has never left me. Since hearing that.
I can't fight this feeling. Swish.
Yeah, the feeling is dampness.
We also have Mr. Spinell. I think you've run into him before.
Yes, Joe Spinell was like this really interesting character actor who came close to mainstream success and rubbed shoulders with some very famous people. Like he kind of barged in on being in the movie The Godfather when he went up to Francis Ford Coppola, again, not knowing him or anybody else, and going like, hey, this is an Italian movie. Nobody's more Italian than your old pal Joe Spinell. Put me in the movie. Come on, I'm not going to leave. You can bring security. I'm going to stay. I want to be in the movie. And he just ingratiated himself into the crew and the production of the film. And so he has a small role in The Godfather. And, all told, he was just kind of like this weird ball of energy. And there's a great documentary about him that was included, I believe, as an extra on the DVD release of Maniac, which also features Caroline Munro. And everyone's kind of full of these great Joe Spinell stories. But my favorite is that apparently he was in Cannes, and it was possibly for filming the other Caroline Munro film he did, the last horror film. And they're all partying and there's this pool, but Joe Spinell only has the shirt on his back. Joe Spinell has no swimwear. He does not have, even though you can imagine a guy that looks like him would own nothing but one-piece bathing suits for men, but he has none. So he leaves and instead comes out in a giant garbage bag that he has fashioned and like tied his belt around.
Oh my God.
And then apparently did a big cannonball, and everyone just kind of feared that garbage bag would come floating along the pool later on. But apparently he managed to keep it together. But yeah, Joe Spinell, super fun guy, sadly dubbed over in this movie. And he's not the only one. Caroline Munro has been completely dubbed over too. She's English. In fact, she's being dubbed by Candy Clark, who was Marjoe Gortner's girlfriend at the time.
Oh, that's interesting. I wondered who Candy Clark was, actually. I like the voice they use. It's a very confident voice that gave the impression that she would be doing more in this movie than she actually does. But yeah, she was mainly known as being a Bond girl. She was in a couple uncredited roles in James Bond films before she finally got like her big break as which one was it? She was in The Spy Who Loved Me as Naomi, right?
Yes, and she's super fun in it. I'm just curious, what did you think of Caroline Munro in this movie?
Oh, that's a good question. Like I said, it seemed like at first the opening, the Space Pirates thing, they were actually doing something really interesting. Confident, ball busting kind of. She just seems very confident in her role and is the leader. Like she seemed like Acton was kind of her sidekick. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They've actually made the hero who does things a lady, which was unusual at the time. And then it turns out that she doesn't actually do much.
No,
which is something you see a lot. Like you have all the appurtenances of her being an independent, strong woman, but she doesn't perform that in any kind of substantial way throughout. So I thought it was a bit of a disappointment how she gets sidetracked in what was supposed to be her entire movie. Yeah,
Starcrash feels like it was made for her and that she's supposed to be Sinbad, essentially. Mm-hmm. I really like the character of Stella Star. I kind of like everything about how she is presented, even though, Caroline Munro's looks, she was a supermodel, or at the very least a model below super. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the rankings go. I'm not sure if she passed the 12 feats of strength that a model must go before she becomes a supermodel. But she was a model. She's very beautiful, and she brings a certain kind of brashness, even though just kind of naturally on her face, even though personality wise she seems to be the total opposite, judging from interviews. She's a very kind and soft spoken and genteel person. But that may be one of the reasons why they dubbed her over with Candy Clark, who brings a certain brashness to the vocal performance, because Munro's English and has a very received pronunciation accent, which might not have been the best match for Star. The thing about Munro is that, again, she's she really is a model first. She's not, I feel bad saying this because she seems super nice. She's not the greatest actress.
No.
She's not amazing. She's better than Marjoe Gortner.
Yeah, nobody in this is an amazing actor. Not even Plummer is super fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, Plummer keeps his dignity, which is more than you can say for Patrick Stewart in non-Star Trek. Wow. Oof. Which is more than
Freudian slip. It is not Star Trek, those movies.
Nope. But that's more than you can say for Patrick Stewart in non-TNG sci-fi movies like Dune and Life Force, where he is pretty embarrassingly bad. Plummer is just he gets his check and he escapes more or less with his dignity unscathed, but he's not great. And nobody really is. Munro, I guess, is one of the better performances in the movie, but she has a face that the camera can love. And if nothing else, giving her the many outfits that Stella Star has. Like there's a version of the movie and this character that is great if you just kind of read between the lines of, there is this woman who goes around raiding spaceships for her own amusement, and her only concerns are that her eunuch pal is there to protect her with his crazy magics, and that she has at least 4 changes of clothes for that hour. Like, I like the weird kind of like young Luxana Troy and Mr. Hom chronicles that are going on here.
Yeah.
But, really, sadly, it's like Caroline Munro, like, not the greatest actress, but like, that's fine. This is not the greatest movie.
We've talked a lot about the movie itself because it frankly is an interesting creation. But we should also mention something that is somewhat remarkable about the episode surrounding it, and that is the surprise cameo from one Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes, because that's something that season 11 is a little bit in love with, and something I kind of hope they do away with in a season 12, is throwing celebrities on here. What did you think of this sketch, Beth?
It's not good.
Nope. It's pretty weak.
What I found interesting about this cameo is the way it kind of brought attention to the crash of generations, right? Like, they have him playing something that's very millennial, which is a venture capitalist. So you have this very 90s figure playing post-internet, and he looks like a car salesman. Like, he has a sleazy mustache and he's wearing like a big loud suit. Like, it doesn't make much sense. His what does Jerry Seinfeld have to say about venture capitalists, really? And it got the question of, like, where does Jerry Seinfeld's observational humor go as he ages? And you sent me some clips of comedians in cars. Is that what that's called?
Oh, yeah, comedians in cars getting coffee. Although I'm sure with Jerry Seinfeld, I'm sure the idea he originally pitched was comedians in cars self-diagnosing autism.
Okay. Anyway, so you showed me the one with Joel, and Joel is very sweet. He comes off, as always, as a sweet, warm guy. But what really struck me is like, oh my God, Jerry Seinfeld is my dad if he was Jewish. Because his favorite thing in the world is just to talk about cars and go to cheap 50s diners. And talk about things that he doesn't quite understand. So he famously, in the last couple of years, he said that he doesn't play colleges because the kids don't know what they're talking about with their PCs and their, all of the things that they care about. And that, he's one of many older comedians who are kind of bristling against the suggestion that you should not punch down, that you should, kind of rein in who your target is, or at least if you're going to make controversial jokes about rape or something, that you do it in a thoughtful way. And he's very much against that.
And here's the crazy thing, though. How does that in any way affect the comedy stylings of Jerry Seinfeld, who is still writing jokes about Pop-Tarts? I have 2 potential explanations for this. One is just kind of cronyism. Like, he's hearing from contemporaries that he's rubbed shoulders with who would have potentially punched down, as again, that is a very 80s and 90s stand-up thing to do. Mm-hmm. And hearing how they won't play college campuses, and he's standing in solidarity to kind of speak out on that. And it's super weird because the only time he's ever been taken to task is he was talking about people complaining about jokes on Twitter and taking comedians to task on Twitter. He likened them to, and I quote, a gay French king. And then people were like, hey, maybe don't use gay as a pejorative, And he's like, oh, these millennials. And that's my only explanation is that either A, he got it from his contemporaries, or sometime in the 90s, he saw the poster of the Little Scene comedy PCU, in which politically correct university is a thing that exists and has a rival with another campus. And one super cool dude played by, I don't know, whoever played the manager in Entourage shows up, and he's going to turn things upside down with wearing polka dot underwear and drinking till noon. Woo! And he saw that, and he had like a Hank Hill nightmare reaction. That's the only other explanation I have.
Well, this is something I worry about as I age. Like, when will I lose touch? When will be the point where I just don't get what's happening anymore? And I think, honestly, this is just what we're seeing here, which is interesting because Joel is doing a revival of his 90s show, and it doesn't feel out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because maybe because he was less successful, maybe because he's just a more thoughtful, humble guy, is able to take these criticisms less personally and kind of try to pick it apart a little bit more thoughtfully.
I think you've touched on it there with the second aspect of it. Like you'll notice how right now we're in an age where a lot of people are struggling, and unfortunately they're doing so very publicly with the idea that their narratives as like, I am a middle class white dude who, if I haven't had a problem with it, it can't be that serious a problem. Like people are still grasping with that. So Joel is not the kind of person who is like reactionary. Like, it's just going from, why is the thing that I always used to do not working when it comes to stand-up comedians with this perspective? It's like, maybe things change. And the fact that like they're having trouble with this is like baffling to me because, you get presented with like different concepts in day-to-day life unless you are, deliberately surrounding yourself in a bubble. And I guess going from comedy club to comedy club and then going home, maybe does that. Maybe you are only surrounded by things that you know and people who look like you or come from a very similar experience.
Well, I think we've about Starcrashed this all to crash. So maybe we should move on to our random question.
That sounds like a great idea. Sean from Twitter writes in to ask, before Fonzie jumped the shark on Happy Days, how did people know a show was out of ideas?
Switched the Darren?
Okay, so you associate the second Darren with Bewitched going off the rails, eh?
Oh, very likely.
I don't know, man. I want to spend more time with Agnes Moorehead and, of course, Uncle Arthur. But you know what? I would say that my term for jumping the shark, and what's even worse than jumping the shark, because how can you call Happy Days' Jumping the Shark episode the worst episode when it's clearly the best one? I think that the worst thing a TV show can do is give us an unexpected visit to the back door, if you know what I mean. You don't want that unexpected backdoor visit. I mean, it's bad enough when it is expected and you're dreading it, but that unexpected backdoor visit, I hate. And by that I mean when a show throws in a backdoor pilot.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. There is nothing worse than tuning into a TV series only to be introduced to brand new characters or having something that is deliberately being set up of, wouldn't you want to spend time with these people instead?
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've got some fabulous skating outfits for wearing in space, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam anything, get in touch with us. Comment on our Facebook group at facebook.com/itsjustashow, email us at info@itsjustashow, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you especially to all our Patreon supporters. You can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up with anything that was mentioned today on It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/15.
All right. Well, you know that a very special time of year approaches, and it's not Donald Pleasence's birthday again. So what do we possibly have on the horizon for a perhaps spookier time of year, Chris?
Well, last night as I was falling asleep, a spoopy voice rose up and cried, "It's Spookloween! You should celebrate with an episode filled with dark rituals, cult music, and an appearance by the great but sadly late Adam West. Season 6, Episode 4, Zombie Nightmare."
Ooh.
Oh my god. I'm so excited.
This is a pretty fantastic episode. This is a goofball movie, and this I remember being an absolute favorite of mine. I had this one on VHS way back when I was into tape trading. It's super good.
I'm a little scared because this is my favorite.
Oh.
This is the number one for me. It doesn't get better than this, and anyone who says otherwise is an idiot.
Send your comments to Beth at itsjustashow.com.
This is the reason why, even though I really like Joel, this is why I think Mike is the stronger is a stronger host, just because of how amazing he is in this episode and all of them. It's prime riffing, people. This is as good as it gets.
So on that note, goodbye, everybody.
See you guys next time. It's going to be a good one. It has Adam molesting Tia Carrera. It's going to be great.
Yeah. It's going to be great, segueing from the theme and season of Space Christmas to Earth Halloween next time on It's Just a Show.
All right, take it away, the Theme Squad Orchestra.
John Barry and the John Barry 7.